In a glittering hall of wealth, arrogance fills the air as a billionaire mocks a humble man. But the man's quiet reply plants the first seed of doubt, leaving the crowd unsettled and the room charged with tension. The laughter was sharp, cutting through the grand hall like broken glass. "Fix that?" The billionaire scoffed, his voice dripping with mockery as he leaned back in his leather chair. "You? Don't make me laugh." A crowd of well-dressed guests burst into snickers, some covering their mouths with jeweled hands, others laughing openly. Champagne glasses clinked. The chandeliers above shook faintly, their crystals scattering shards of light across the polished marble floor. At the center of it all stood the man. He was nothing special to the eye, at least. Not to those who measured worth by suits and watches. His clothes were plain, his shoes worn at the edges. He carried no gold cufflinks, no engraved pen in his pocket. But he stood tall, his posture unshaken by the wall of laughter pressing down on him. His voice was calm, quiet, almost steady as stone. "Give me 1 minute," he said. "I can fix it." The words landed in the room like a stone in still water. The laughter wavered. A few chuckles lingered in the corners, but they sounded forced now, uneasy. The billionaire leaned forward, his lips curling into a smirk. His tailored navy suit caught the light, his diamond watch flashing like it was laughing too. He tapped his glass against the table. "Do you know who I am?" he said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "I built this company. I own everything in this room. And you," he gestured at the man's simple shirt, his rough hands, "you think you can fix what my top engineers couldn't?" The man didn't flinch. He let the insult hang in the air, heavy and poisonous, before answering. "Yes." The answer was so short, so unshaken, that the crowd shifted in their seats. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband. A young assistant in the back stopped typing on his tablet, his eyes fixed on the stranger. The billionaire laughed again, louder this time, throwing his head back. "1 minute?" he jeered. "Do you all hear that? He says he'll fix it in 1 minute." The hall filled with uneasy laughter again, but beneath it ran a current of discomfort. Something about the man's composure, his refusal to bend, his quiet certainty was unsettling. The billionaire rose to his feet, slamming his glass down so hard that golden champagne spilled across the white linen tablecloth. His voice boomed across the hall. "Fine. If you're so confident, show us. 1 minute. Let's see this miracle of yours." The man didn't smile, didn't blink. He only nodded once, as if he had been waiting for that moment all along. The billionaire's grin widened, feeding on the tension in the room. "But when you fail," he paused, savoring the silence, "you'll walk out of this building and never show your face here again. Understand?" A hush fell. Even the waiters froze, holding their silver trays midair. All eyes turned to the man, expecting him to retreat, to fold under the crushing weight of humiliation, but instead he stepped forward. His shoes tapped softly against the marble, the sound oddly steady, echoing louder than the billionaire's laughter had moments before. He placed his hand on the object, the broken centerpiece of the billionaire's display, the very thing the engineers had given up on. His fingers brushed over it with the care of someone who understood more than he revealed. The crowd leaned forward, breaths held. The man looked up, meeting the billionaire's eyes without fear. "Your minute," he said, his voice low but firm, "starts now." The billionaire's smile froze, and the hall, once full of laughter, fell into a silence so deep it felt like the air itself was waiting. The clock ticked. 60 seconds. All eyes locked on the man's steady hands, wondering if arrogance would win, or if silence was about to shatter into something far greater. The ticking of the clock on the far wall grew louder than the murmurs of the crowd. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It was as if the grand hall itself had gone silent just 2 Measure this man's. Promised. The billionaire folded his arms. A smug grin painted across his face. His laughter had faded into a sneer now, as though he was already rehearsing the humiliation he would deliver once the minute ended. He leaned against the edge of the table, diamond cufflinks glittering under the golden light of the chandeliers. 30 seconds in, he said loudly, his voice booming across the marble and glass. And nothing. Still nothing. Are you impressed yet? Because I'm not. The crowd chuckled nervously, though their eyes never left the man in the center. He didn't rush. His hands moved with precision, fingers tracing the broken lines, the out-of-place bolts, the delicate connections that had confused engineers before him. His touch was soft, deliberate, almost like he was listening to the machine breathe. The billionaire scoffed again. What do you think you're doing caressing it? That's not fixing. That's wasting time. The man didn't answer. He pulled a small tool from his pocket, not shiny or expensive. Just a simple worn piece of metal that looked more at home in a workshop than in a billionaire's ballroom. The crowd gasped quietly, some exchanging glances. Who walks into a hall like this carrying that? 10 seconds left, the billionaire barked, glancing at his watch. His voice was dripping with anticipation, savoring what he thought was an inevitable failure. The man twisted one final piece into place. The sound was faint, a tiny click, but it echoed through the silence like a gunshot. He straightened slowly, stepping back, his face as calm as it had been from the start. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to, because the broken centerpiece, the machine everyone had dismissed, the pride of the billionaire's collection, came to life. A low hum. Then a flicker of light. Then the full glow of polished steel and glass as it powered on, flawless and steady. Gasps rippled through the room. A woman covered her mouth with her hand. A young man in the corner whispered, "No way." The billionaire's smirk faltered. His eyes narrowed, darting to the machine as if it had betrayed him. The crowd leaned closer, their unease now replaced with astonishment. The man had said 1 minute, and in 1 minute he had done what others could not, but he still said nothing. He only looked at the billionaire, his calm gaze cutting sharper than any insult. The billionaire clenched his fists. His cheeks burned red under the chandeliers. "Lucky guess," he spat. "Anyone could have done that with enough tries." But his voice cracked at the edges. He knew it wasn't luck. The silence of the crowd confirmed it. They weren't laughing anymore. They weren't even breathing the same way. Something had shifted. The man had spoken only a few words since entering the hall, but his silence carried more weight than the billionaire's booming voice. And in that silence, the crowd began to see the cracks in arrogance. The billionaire slammed his palm against the table, trying to regain control. "This doesn't prove anything," he shouted. "One broken gadget, one parlor trick, that's all this is." But even as he spoke, the murmurs rose around him, people whispering to each other, their eyes darting between the glowing machine and the calm figure who had fixed it in a minute. The billionaire could feel it, his grip on the room slipping, his authority being chipped away. And the man? He still hadn't raised his voice. He still hadn't bragged or mocked. He simply let the truth sit in front of them, undeniable, glowing, humming, alive. Tick. Tock. The clock on the wall struck the final second. The full minute had passed, and the silence that followed was deafening. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, rising into a storm. Eyes shifted from the machine to the billionaire, waiting to see how he would respond. For the first time, the billionaire wasn't laughing. He was cornered. The machine's hum filled the air, steady and strong, like a quiet heartbeat echoing through the marble hall. People couldn't stop staring. Guests who had come only to laugh and drink now leaned closer, whispering urgently to one another. The glow of the restored centerpiece reflected in their wide eyes. For a long moment, no one looked at the billionaire. And that was the first crack. He saw it. He felt it. His jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. He had built his empire on dominance, on being the loudest, the strongest presence in every room. But right now, no one was looking at him. They were looking at the man. Enough! The billionaire barked, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings. Stop gawking like children. It's just a machine. The crowd startled, some straightening in their seats. But the billionaire's tone sounded less like command and more like desperation. The man said nothing. He didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stood there, quiet as stone, letting the billionaire's anger burn itself out. The billionaire paced, his polished shoes snapping against the marble with every step. His face glistened with sweat under the chandelier's light. He forced a laugh, thin and hollow. You're all impressed by this? By some nobody who fiddled with wires? A woman in the front row raised her hand halfway, almost timidly. But sir, she said, her voice small but steady, you said it was impossible. Your engineers tried for weeks. He did it in 60 seconds. Gasps fluttered across the hall. The billionaire froze. His eyes darted to her, sharp and furious, but he quickly plastered on a smile. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Do you? He snapped. The woman shrank back, but her husband placed a protective hand on her shoulder. The gesture didn't go unnoticed. More eyes shifted not just to the man now, but away from the billionaire. Away from his control. And that was the second crack. The man finally spoke, his voice calm, almost gentle. You measure people by what they wear, by the shine of their shoes or the weight of their watch. He paused, letting the words settle. But machines don't care about suits. Truth doesn't care about arrogance. The crowd stilled. His words were simple, but they cut deep. The billionaire's smile twitched, then collapsed into a scowl. You think you're clever, don't you? He hissed, his voice low but sharp. You think fixing one trinket makes you something? You're nothing, nothing. His voice cracked on the last word. The man didn't argue. He only tilted his head slightly, like someone studying a child mid-tantrum. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. The billionaire could feel it, the power slipping from his hands, the respect draining from the room, one stare at a time. He turned back to the machine, his breath uneven. His hand shot out, gripping its polished edge. For a split second, he seemed ready to rip it apart, to prove it was still broken. But his fingers trembled. He pulled back, realizing the eyes of the entire hall were still on him. Tick, tock. The clock's rhythm mocked him now. The man finally moved just one step forward, slow and deliberate. His shadow stretched long under the golden lights. I told you, he said softly. 1 minute. And the crowd broke. They erupted not in laughter, but in applause. Slow at first, then faster, louder, filling every corner of the hall. Some stood, clapping, their voices rising with cheers. Others only watched silently, but their eyes carried a respect the billionaire had never seen aimed anywhere but himself. The billionaire stood frozen, his face pale, his grip on control unraveling thread by thread. The applause thundered on, drowning out his protests. For the first time in years, the billionaire wasn't the center of attention, and deep inside, fear began to creep in. The sound of clapping rolled like thunder across the marble hall. Applause echoed off the walls, bouncing beneath the chandeliers, drowning the billionaire's authority in a storm of approval. The machine glowed steady in the center, humming like proof that arrogance could crumble in a minute. The billionaire's chest heaved. His fists trembled at his sides. He opened his mouth once, twice, but the applause swallowed his voice whole. Finally, he snapped. Enough! His roar cracked through the cheers, slicing the air. The applause slowed, then faded into a heavy silence. He stood there, face red, veins pressing against his neck. His eyes darted wildly across the crowd, the same crowd that had once bowed to his every word. Now they looked at him differently, doubtful, uncertain. "You fools," he barked, pointing a shaking finger at them. "All of you. You clap for a fraud, a nobody. Do you know who I am? I built this empire. Me, not him." His words fell heavy, but they didn't land the way he expected. A few guests lowered their eyes, uncomfortable. Others exchanged quiet glances. No one clapped. No one cheered for him. The man stood still, his posture relaxed, his eyes steady. He didn't return the billionaire's rage. He didn't need to. The billionaire slammed his hand against the table, rattling glasses. "He tricked you," he shouted, spit flying from his mouth. "He probably tampered with it before some cheap trick to make me look foolish." But the machine hummed on, glowing steady, defying every excuse. A man in the back finally spoke, his voice calm but clear. "No tricks. I watched him. We all did." Murmurs rippled again, stronger this time. People nodded, their whispers rising into agreement. The billionaire's face twisted. He pointed now at the calm figure in the center. "You think you're better than me, don't you? Standing there with your smug little silence. Say something, go on." But the man didn't move. His silence was a wall, impenetrable. That silence broke the billionaire more than any insult could have. His voice cracked into a shout. "You're nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing." His words echoed, harsh and shrill, but they bounced back empty. The guests weren't nodding anymore. They weren't agreeing. One woman whispered to her friend, "Why is he so afraid?" Another muttered, "He's losing it." And that was the truth. The cracks in the room had spread too far. The billionaire's power, once absolute, was slipping through his fingers, and everyone could see it. The man finally shifted. Just a single step closer, slow, deliberate. His gaze was steady, calm. "I never said I was better," he said softly. "I just said I could fix it." The words landed like stones in water, sending ripples through the hall. Simple. Clear, undeniable. The billionaire's lips quivered. For the first time, his eyes darted away from the man's. He looked around the room, searching for anyone to nod, to laugh, to support him. But all he found were eyes that no longer believed. The billionaire staggered, caught in the silence of a crowd that no longer followed him. And in that silence, he realized his empire wasn't collapsing in boardrooms or markets. It was collapsing here, in front of everyone. The marble floor seemed to glow under the machine's steady light. The applause had died, but the echo of it still trembled in the air. The billionaire's face was tight, his smile long gone. He stood rigid near the table, his breath shallow, his suit clinging to him as if even the fabric could feel his fear. His eyes darted from one face to another, looking for a lifeline in a sea of doubt. But the crowd was changing. People no longer whispered behind their hands. Their voices had grown bolder, spilling into the open. They weren't just guests now. They were witnesses to a power shift that no one had expected. "Did you see the way he fixed it?" One man murmured loudly enough for others to hear. "He didn't even break a sweat." Another replied. The billionaire clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. His ears burned with their words. Silence. He snapped, his voice echoing under the chandeliers. "You're here because of me. My invitation. My hall. My money. Don't forget that." But no one clapped. No one looked ashamed. The man in the center remained still. He didn't need to speak. The room was speaking for him. Then, from the back of the hall, a deep voice rose. Calm, unshaken. "You invited us here to witness a demonstration. We have. Heads turned. A tall, gray-haired guest, someone the billionaire usually paraded as a loyal ally, was standing now, his hands clasped in front of him. "You promised us excellence," the guest continued, his tone even but heavy. "And yet, the excellence did not come from you." The billionaire's throat worked, but no sound came out. The guest stepped closer, each stride slow and deliberate, his shoes striking the marble like a judge's gavel. "For years you told us no one else mattered, that only you could solve problems, only you could build. But tonight, someone you mocked did what you could not." Gasps and murmurs swelled again. Some people nodded. Some even whispered words like "finally" and "about time." The billionaire shook his head violently. No. This is all staged. He's part of some trick. You're all blind." The man still hadn't spoken. He simply stood, hands at his sides, gaze steady. The billionaire spun toward him, desperate now. Tell them you're nothing without me. Tell them this was a fluke." But the man's silence was louder than any. Confession. The clock on the far wall ticked softly. Tick, tock, tick. Each sound stretched the tension further, like a rope being pulled to its breaking point. The gray-haired guest looked at the billionaire, his eyes narrowing. "You've built an empire on humiliating others. Maybe tonight you've only humiliated yourself." A ripple of shock swept through the hall. No one had ever spoken to the billionaire like that, not here, not anywhere. The billionaire staggered back a step, bumping into the edge of the table. His drink toppled, spilling dark liquid across the white linen like a spreading stain. He stared at it for a moment, then at the man. "I'll ruin you," he hissed under his breath, but the microphone on his lapel carried his words through the speakers. Everyone heard. The crowd gasped. The man finally lifted his head fully, his eyes meeting the billionaire's. For the first time, his calm gaze had a flicker of something else, something sharper, deeper. Not anger, not fear, just inevitability. "You already have," he said quietly. The words were soft, but they cracked through the hall like thunder. The billionaire blinked, taken aback as the crowd murmured louder than ever. The billionaire opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The murmurs were swelling into a tide now, and for the first time, the man shifted his weight forward as if he was about to speak, or reveal something no one in the room expected. The murmurs swelled until they filled the grand hall like a storm building at sea. The billionaire's chest rose and fell quickly, his breath ragged. Sweat clung to his forehead despite the cool air. He scanned the faces around him, faces that once glowed with admiration, but now carried doubt, curiosity, even quiet contempt. He couldn't let this stand. Not here, not in front of them. "No," he muttered, shaking his head, then louder. "No. This is not how this ends." The crowd fell silent again. Every eye swung back to him. The billionaire straightened his suit jacket, trying to reassemble the mask of control. His voice steadied, though the tremor at the edges betrayed him. "You think you've seen something impressive?" He pointed toward the glowing machine. "That was nothing. Nothing but a trick." He turned, pacing, his voice growing sharper. "A man who wants respect doesn't just fix toys. A man proves himself when the stakes are real." "So," he spun back, eyes narrowing on the calm figure, "prove yourself." The room froze. The man didn't move. He didn't blink. His steady presence seemed to mock the billionaire more than any words could. The billionaire jabbed a finger at him. "1 machine, 1 minute? That's a showman's trick. But let's raise the stakes." He waved to an assistant who rushed nervously from the side. Within moments, another piece of equipment was wheeled out, larger, more complex, half covered with a cloth. Gasps rippled across the hall as the cloth was yanked away, revealing a massive, intricate device that looked more like a beast than a machine. This the billionaire declared, is what my engineers have been struggling with for months. Millions of dollars spent. Hours wasted. They say it can't be fixed. They say it can't be done. He sneered, eyes locking on the man. But you claim to be different. You claim you can fix anything. So here's your chance. In front of all of us. The crowd whispered fiercely, tension thick in the air. Some leaned forward, eager. Others shook their heads. Uneasy. The man finally moved, taking a slow step forward. His shoes tapped softly against the marble. He studied the machine, his expression unreadable. The billionaire smirked, mistaking silence for hesitation. What's wrong? Not so confident now? Afraid the miracle worker will look like a fool when the whole room is watching? He turned to the guests, his voice booming. Here's the deal. If he succeeds, he paused, jaw tightening, I'll admit I was wrong. Gasp spread again. The crowd had never heard those words from his mouth before. But if he fails, the billionaire continued, his voice sharp, he leaves this city tonight. Gone. No second chances. No applause. No whispers of respect. Gone. The silence was suffocating. Everyone's eyes snapped to the man, waiting for his response. He stood still for a long moment. The machine's shadow loomed behind him, a giant waiting to test his dignity. Then, finally, he lifted his gaze. His voice was calm, even. I don't accept your terms. The hall erupted with shock. People gasped, murmurs flying in every direction. The billionaire's eyes widened, his face twisting in disbelief. You what? He spat. You refuse? After all that bravado? You refuse? The man took another step forward, steady. His voice was low, but every syllable cut through the hall. I don't fix things to win your approval. I don't fix things to prove myself to a room full of strangers. I fix because it needs to be done. Because truth deserves to stand. Not because you demand it. The words rang like bells, clear and heavy. The billionaire froze, his fury twisting into something darker. The crowd whispered louder, some nodding, some staring wide-eyed at the calm man who had refused the trap. And just like that, the billionaire realized he hadn't cornered him. He had cornered himself. The billionaire's hand shook as he gripped the edge of the machine. His voice was low, dangerous, trembling. Then you leave me no choice, he growled. The crowd held its breath. Waiting for what he would do next. The silence stretched long and thin. Like glass about to shatter. The billionaire's fists clenched at his sides, his knuckles whitening. His jaw worked furiously, but no words came. For the first time, the great master of every room stood speechless before his own guests, and that silence. It betrayed him. The audience felt it. They saw it. The whispers grew louder, bolder. Did you see how he refused? He wasn't afraid. He just didn't need him. Who really holds the power here? The billionaire's ears burned as the murmurs seeped into him like poison. His empire had always thrived on one thing, fear. As long as people feared him, they obeyed him. But fear was slipping from their eyes, replaced by something worse. Enough. He roared suddenly, slamming his fist against the machine's metal frame. The clang echoed through the hall like a gunshot, silencing the whispers. His chest heaved. His eyes blazed. You think he's brave? He bellowed, pointing at the calm man. You think his little speeches mean anything? He's nothing. A trickster, a fraud, hiding behind pretty words. But even as he spoke, his voice cracked at the edges, desperation bleeding through. The calm man stood still, hands folded behind his back. He hadn't raised his voice once, hadn't moved with violence, and yet the weight of his presence filled the room more than the billionaire's fury. The crowd noticed. Their eyes flicked between the two men, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the balance shifted. The billionaire's words no longer commanded, they pleaded. From the side, one of his senior board members stepped forward, voice cautious. "Sir, perhaps we should not." Silence. The billionaire snapped, turning on him. "You dare question me now? After everything I've built?" His face twisted, veins bulging. "Do you think I'll let a stranger humiliate me in my own hall?" The board member recoiled, lips tightening, but he said nothing more. The billionaire turned back, breathing heavily. But the damage was done. The room had seen it, his allies shrinking back, his temper unraveling. The calm man finally spoke, voice steady and low. "Power built on fear never lasts. Today proves it." The billionaire staggered back a half step, as though the words struck him physically. He glanced around wildly, looking for a pair of loyal eyes, but everywhere he looked, he saw unease. The iron grip he had held for years was slipping through his fingers. Then came the cruelest blow. A woman near the front, an investor, bold and sharp, spoke aloud. "I've watched you for years. Always thought no one could stand up to you. But tonight," she gestured toward the calm man, "tonight, you look smaller than him." The gasp that rippled across the hall cut deeper than any insult. The billionaire's breath hitched. His heart thundered in his chest. For a brief second, his vision blurred. Smaller. That word echoed, mocked, crushed him. He staggered forward, slamming his hands on the podium. His voice broke into a raw growl. "You think this man is your savior? You think he's better than me? I'll show you all what happens when you turn on me. I'll tear him apart piece by piece until there's nothing left." But his voice cracked mid-sentence, collapsing under its own weight. His threat sounded hollow, like an actor stumbling through lines the audience no longer believed. The billionaire's hand shook violently as he reached into his coat pocket. The crowd gasped, unsure whether it was a weapon, a contract, or something darker. The calm man didn't flinch. He simply watched, silent, as the entire hall held its breath. The billionaire's trembling hand pulled something from his coat. Gasps erupted, shoulders tensed, eyes widened. Fear flashed like lightning across the room. But it wasn't a weapon, it was a contract. Thick papers bound together with a golden clip, the kind that had crushed lives and built fortunes. He slammed it on the table, the sound sharp and hollow. "There." He barked, voice raw. "Sign this. Prove your worth. Show them all you're not a coward, or I'll make sure no one here dares speak your name again." His words rang desperate, stripped of authority. The man's hand shook so violently the pages fluttered, betraying him more than his voice ever could. The calm man stepped forward. His footsteps echoed slow, deliberate, each one a drumbeat against the billionaire's crumbling throne. He stopped just short of the table, eyes steady. "You still believe paper gives you power," he said softly. "But everyone here knows your empire was never built on truth. Only signatures forced by fear." A murmur of agreement rolled through the crowd. This time no one shushed it. The billionaire's eyes darted left and right, searching for support, but none came. A younger man in the back, one of the billionaire's employees, finally spoke. His voice shook, but his words carried weight. "You've ruined families with those papers. Mine included." The billionaire spun around, face red with rage. "Lies, ungrateful lies." His voice cracked, sputtering like a fire losing air, but another voice rose. Then another. "You fired my father after 20 years. You stole my home. You crushed my brother's business." The hall trembled with their words. The billionaire stumbled back, chest heaving, sweat rolling down his temple. Each voice was another hammer strike, each confession a stone pulled from the foundation of his empire. His greatest fear had come true. The silence was broken. "Stop it." he roared, slamming the papers to the floor. "You think you can turn on me? I made you. Every one of you owes me everything." The calm man bent down, lifted the contract, and held it up for all to see. Then, without a word, he tore it clean in half. The ripping sound thundered louder than the billionaire's scream. The crowd erupted. Gasps, cheers, defiant voices rising like a storm. The billionaire staggered back, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing like a man drowning without air. His knees buckled, but he caught himself on the edge of the podium. For the first time, he looked. Old, fragile Dot, the calm man's voice cut through the storm, low but unshakable. "This is how it ends. Not with your power taken by force, but with it leaving you, piece by piece, because no one believes in you anymore." The billionaire's eyes widened. He looked at the crowd and saw no loyalty, no fear. Only contempt, only freedom. A shiver ran down his spine. His empire wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing. The billionaire's lips trembled as he whispered something only the front row could hear. "If I fall, I'll take him down with me." The crowd froze, eyes snapping to the calm man. The air thickened with dread, waiting to see what the billionaire's final, desperate play would be. The billionaire's whisper lingered in the air like smoke. "If I fall, I'll take him down with me." The words spread through the hall in uneasy murmurs. People leaned forward, hearts pounding. His once proud empire was in shambles, but no one knew how far he would go to protect the fragments. The calm man stood motionless, his expression unreadable. His stillness was more unnerving than the billionaire's rage. It was the calm before a storm. Suddenly, the billionaire lunged. He grabbed the microphone from its stand and hurled it toward the calm man. The heavy metal crashed against the floor with a sharp clang. Gasps filled the room. The billionaire's face twisted with fury, veins standing out against his neck. "You think you can embarrass me? You think you can stand here and take what's mine? I'll end this right now." He snatched a glass of water from the table and flung it. The liquid splashed across the stage, shimmering under the lights like shattered diamonds. But the calm man didn't flinch. Not once. He simply stood there, soaked yet unshaken. His eyes fixed on the raging billionaire. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, from the back, a voice rang out, pathetic. It cut sharper than any weapon. The word rolled through the hall, picked up by murmurs, then whispers, then bold voices repeating it again and again. Pathetic, pathetic. The billionaire's face drained of color. His chest rose and fell in panicked gasps. He turned toward the voices, but everywhere he looked, he saw only eyes staring back cold, unafraid. The crowd he had ruled with fear was gone. In its place stood a jury, ready to deliver its verdict. His hands shook violently. In a frenzy, he pulled out his phone and waved it in the air. "You want proof? You think this man is untouchable? I have files, records, evidence. I'll bury him." The crowd leaned in tense, but the calm man finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, yet it carried across the hall. Truth doesn't fear exposure. Lies do. The billionaire froze. The phone slipped from his grasp, clattering loudly against the marble floor. The sound echoed like a gavel striking. His shoulders sagged. His eyes darted around, desperate for rescue, but no one moved to help him. Even his closest allies had stepped back, leaving him stranded in the spotlight of his own collapse. "Do you see it now?" The calm man asked softly. "Your power isn't being taken from you. You're throwing it away yourself." The billionaire staggered back, chest heaving, as though the very walls were closing in on him, and then, the final humiliation. One of his guards, loyal for years, stepped forward. Instead of protecting him, the man extended a hand toward the calm figure. Not to attack, but to offer support. The gesture was small, but it shook the billionaire to his core. Even his protectors had switched sides. The billionaire's knees buckled, and he fell to the floor with a crash. The crowd gasped. His trembling hand reached out not for power, not for wealth, but toward the calm man's shoes. And with a broken voice he rasped, "Help me, before it's too late." The hall was frozen. The billionaire, once towering and untouchable, now knelt on the floor. His tailored suit was wrinkled, his face pale, his voice cracked with desperation. His trembling hand clutched at the calm man's shoes like a drowning man grasping for driftwood. "Help me, before it's too late," he rasped. The crowd stared in stunned silence. The same man who had laughed at the weak, mocked the humble, and ruled by fear was now begging. The image was almost too surreal to believe. The calm man looked down at him. For a long moment he didn't speak. The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. The billionaire's labored breathing filled the space, every gasp another reminder of his collapse. Finally, the calm man bent slightly, his voice low but clear enough for all to hear. "You wanted the world to kneel before you. Now you kneel before the truth." A ripple moved through the hall. Heads nodded. Eyes glistened. For the first time, the crowd felt the weight of justice, not forced, not violent, but natural, undeniable. The billionaire's lips quivered. I can change. I'll give it all back. The money, the power, just don't let them see me like this." The calm man's expression remained still, but his words were sharp. "They already see you. Not as a giant, not as a ruler, as a man who thought wealth made him invincible. And now they see the truth. Wealth without honor is nothing." The billionaire flinched, tears welling in his eyes. He tried to rise, but his legs buckled. From the crowd, the voices that had once whispered now rose, steady and bold. No more contracts, no more fear, no more silence. The chorus grew louder, filling the hall with the sound of freedom breaking chains. The billionaire covered his ears, shaking his head, as though the truth itself burned. The calm man stepped back, giving him space, but his presence was unshakable. "You demanded a stage. You demanded an audience. Tonight you got both. But the performance is over." He turned slightly toward the crowd. "Let this be the lesson. Dignity cannot be bought, respect cannot be forced, and arrogance always collapses under its own weight." The words struck deep. The crowd erupted not in chaos, but in applause. Not for power, not for wealth, but for the quiet victory of truth. The billionaire, slumped and defeated, tried one last whisper. You ruined me." The calm man looked down at him one final time. "No, you ruined yourself." And with that, he turned and walked away, his step steady, his dignity intact. The billionaire remained on the floor, surrounded not by loyalists, but by the weight of his own disgrace. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. His empire was gone, not stolen, not overthrown, but dissolved by the truth everyone had witnessed with their own eyes. The man who laughed at humility had been silenced. The man who mocked dignity had been judged. And the man who thought himself untouchable now lived as the most exposed of them all. As the calm man reached the exit, the billionaire's broken whisper trailed after him. Who are you?" The calm man paused, turned slightly, and gave the faintest of smiles. "Just the man you underestimated." And then he walked out, leaving silence and justice in his wake.